All right, these 5 coins are coiling up. This is NC Hammer. My name's Neil, where we keep technical analysis short and sweet. We're actually looking specifically right now at DNT, and we can see that DNT is trying to break over this downward trend line. And typically, when we see that happen, we start seeing a major push up. We can do this, for example, back here, like we talked about. We had that long trail out period, but once it broke that downward trend line, this orange line right here, consolidation, touched the 200 EMA, pushed up over the 200 EMA, used it as support, pushed up again, and then had a major rejection down to support. And immediately after that, a massive pump. I believe it was around 800% increase from that push. But looking at the price now compared to when it was before it did the push, it's nearly identical at the same spot. So keeping DNT in mind, we could expect a little bit more consolidation, which is very nice whenever it breaks over this downward trend line, not rapid movements as it'll retrace really quick. But we can expect a little bit of consolidation, slowly creeping over that 200 EMA, and then a major push up, potentially 105% for the first push up. So keep DNT on your radar, but don't get it confused with BNT, where we had an amazing entry down here at 36 cents and an exit right around here, around a 92% increase before they had a rejection, mainly due to trying to stop a lawsuit that was happening. And that was actually May 11th, right around here. As you can see, it was right at that downward trend line, which we could expect some kind of rejection. Now we are getting support around the 54 cent, trying to hold above the 200 EMA, but it's looking better and better each day and still has a very long way to go to hit its all-time high. I believe its all-time high was $20. It's currently at 57 cents. So pretty good risk to reward ratio on BNT as well as DNT. But both are coiling up. DNT just needs to do more consolidation. Keep an eye on this one because it can move very fast. And it's starting to get a lot of pressure and a lot of support from the bottom lines that are shown. Moving over to IOTX. IOTX is still consolidating, trying very hard to hold above this black trend line right here. But if that does manage to hold as support, we could expect a 618 retracement being around 0.06 cents for its first stop. And ultimately, it would need to break this downward trend line, starting from here, going down. And I imagine we would see a touch somewhere around the 7 cents, a little bit of rejection, possibly support around 0.06, and then touch again and potentially break towards the upside. IOTX still also has a very high potential to move upwards, as we are only at 2 cents, and I believe its high was 50 cents. Pretty substantial gains, but it is in a big bullish pendant. If it does end up holding this support, pushing back up towards this downward trend line, you can imagine a little bit of rejection due to it being only 2 touches at the top. I typically like to see 3, maybe even 4 before a potential breakout on IOTX. However, if you're buying at the bottom, you have a lot of room where you can be selling out before it reaches that downward trend line. A push from here up is about 191% increase. But I'm not putting my entire bag in IOTX. I do believe a little bit more in quant and compound at the moment. But IOTX is a very good bet. Moving over to Tornado. Tornado's still doing its consolidation, still looking very healthy, still holding above the 200 EMA, trying to hold above the upward trend line. Broke the downward trend line like we were just talking about with DNT coiling up. Same with Tornado Cash. It had that push up towards this resistance line right here as expected. and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 touches to the top. If it can hold this support and hold above the 200 EMA, we could expect this to be touching this trend line again once it breaks that $11 mark. According to Fibonacci retracement, the 618 is around $26, currently at $9, all-time high above $450. So I keep recommending Tornado. You can trade it on MEXC, lowest trading fee platform, references in the link below. But keeping Tornado in mind, if you haven't bought in yet, it's not financial advice, but it is highly recommended to try and get a small bag at least of Tornado Cash through MEXC, even if you have to use VPN, but not advisable. Moving over to Toshi. Toshi is also forming this downward wedge, which we have seen in XCN. We needed to break over this downward trend line, and we could see a major push up, maybe a little bit of resistance here in the 0.0005 area. But beyond that, it has a major push potential up to 0.009, 618 being 0.014. That's dropping a zero. It may not seem like much, but that potential increase for Toshi, being Coinbase's meme coin, is around 242%. Keeping in mind that it is a meme coin, they do have rug pulls and things like that. However, since it is backed by Coinbase, Coinbase could potentially be a little bit more feasible to not be a negative meme coin, like somebody who just posts something on the internet and then it's rug pulled a little bit later. Moving over to Compound and then Quant for the last one for this video. Compound made that retrace back to the $47 mark, getting some support, consolidation as expected, and we could see a slow trickle, hopefully not a rapid push, as that makes it a little bit more unhealthy market, but a slow push over that 200 EMA. We are at the 50 area on the RSI. We're forming a little bit of a W here, potentially pushing over that yellow line, and then considering it support and a push upwards towards this high being around $61. We sold around $60. But with that, all we need to do really is break that downward trend line, which would be something like this. And this black trend line right here are the two major ones that we want to be looking at for support and resistance. Similar to the other coins we've been looking at, typically when it breaks over a downward trend line, we get a push upwards, as we saw with this trend line going down. When we broke over that, we saw that major push up from $43 up. So as soon as it broke that downward trend line, is around a 50% increase in price. So keeping in mind that this downward trend line is a more important one to be breaking, we could see well over a 50% increase from its current position where we'd previously entered before we sold at $60. This would be around 121% increase. So keep Compound in your radar, as it does have extremely high, all-time high. I believe it's way up here around $550, currently at $50. So a lot of potential for Compound is coiling up very nicely. And moving on to Quant, the last one for this video. For Aaron, I'm glad you did not sell at a $7,000 loss, as we expected it to hit this area, which is the 618 retracement on the Fibonacci, and holding support over that downward trend line and this orange downward trend line, both as expected. This is a lot of support, a very, very strong area for Quant. We expected it to have a little bit of consolidation, maybe a little bit pushed downward to test off that 200 EMA. We are getting more bullish momentum, even though Bitcoin is just staying at 107 roughly, but with that, it should potentially be pushing upwards around 115, and just holding a few days instead of selling, you recouped a pretty nice majority of your money back. I assume around $3,500 just holding instead of selling at that absolute low. But we could see this push up. We do want to keep in mind this trend line right here, which again, that resistance is around the 0.618 on the Fibonacci. That's actually incorrect. Right here around 110 is what we could be seeing this push to before we get a little bit of consolidation, maybe a rejection back down to the $97 mark, and holding support over that 200 EMA. But quant is a very good bet. We are only at $100. It has a potential to hit over 1,000. I know it doesn't seem possible if you've been dealing with the stock market, but the cryptocurrency market works a little bit different. And we've seen astronomical pushes, 3,000, 32,000% increases, just ridiculous profit just from holding a coin instead of leaving it in your bank or dealing with the stock market's 2% increase. So keeping that in mind, quant is looking more bullish as it did have that major support here around $85 supporting off that downward trend line. So do not sell your quant, in my opinion, not financial advice, but we could still see that push up to 110 before a little bit of consolidation, and then a potential another leg up if Bitcoin starts pushing up again. So that's it for this video. Always recommend Grass for free airdrop money, Coinbase, Roller Coin, references in the link below. Like and subscribe if you want, and good luck. Have fun with it.